Hello, welcome to the OLA Presentation Accessibility Guidelines webinar. This webinar is for all presenters and speakers involved in an OLA conference session, pre-conference session, workshop, meeting, or course. I'm your presenter, Kelsey Barker. This webinar will be recorded. The recording and slide deck will be made available afterward. If you have questions during this presentation, please share them in the chat and I will answer any questions that I can. This webinar supports the OLA Presentation Accessibility Guidelines. In it, we will discuss the purpose of the guidelines and webinar, general guidelines for presenters, guidelines for presentation materials, including format, fonts and text, images, and videos, and speaking guidelines for presenters. We will conclude with a brief question and answer session and share further resources for presenters. The OLA Presentation Accessibility Guidelines outline best practices for presenters to ensure the inclusion of all attendees at OLA conferences, workshops, meetings, and other events. We will begin with a few general guidelines for speakers. It is important for speakers to be open to diversity in your audience and accommodating of accessibility issues. Presenters will gladly accommodate accessibility requests from the audience. For example, a presenter works with an audience member with hearing impairment and a sign language interpreter to give the audience member the best experience of the presentation. It is important for speakers to plan inclusive activities and be considerate of potential accessibility issues. This includes, but is not limited to, mobility constraints, visual or hearing impairment, cognitive or learning disabilities, and difficulty communicating. For example, a presenter understands that not all audience members can easily navigate the presentation room, so they consider how an audience participation activity could be organized with participants seated. Finally, it is important for speakers to use multiple communication and learning styles. Presenters will provide a variety of print, visual, video, and audio information in their presentations, and they will accommodate verbal, written, and typed communication from the audience. For example, a panel moderator accepts questions from the audience both on written note cards and through the feedback feature on the conference app. Next, we will discuss presentation materials. It is important to make presentation materials accessible for all participants. When formatting presentations, handouts, and other presentation materials, please give the file a clear descriptive name. This allows participants to understand what the file is and how to access it. Please share presentation materials with participants ahead of time if possible. This allows participants to review the material before the presentation and arrange for accommodations in advance if needed. Please offer multiple file formats for flexibility. Not only will this help participants using assistive technology like a screen reader, but all participants will benefit from having a variety of options for viewing the material. And finally, please format documents and presentations to support the use of assistive devices. We will cover this on the next slide. A simple way to make presentation materials accessible is turn on the accessibility settings. This helps make the presentation accessible for participants with assistive devices like screen readers. In Google Slides, choose Tools from the menu bar and select Accessibility Settings. Turn on all the options in the box. In PowerPoint, find Accessibility Settings under the View tab. Click the Check Accessibility button to view full inspection. Results appear in a sidebar. Also, change the language settings to English to support the use of screen readers. It is important that presenters use fully accessible fonts and text. Here are some do's and don'ts for text style. Do use a link shortener to help participants access content. Do use a consistent thickness of font and a clear hierarchy of font sizes to show titles, headings, and body text to help participants read presentation materials. Do not use a font smaller than 20 point on a presentation. Font that appears large on a computer screen can be too small to read from the audience. Do not use decorative or unconventional fonts that may be hard to read. Do not use more than 1 or 2 font styles throughout the presentation. Presenters should be cognizant of how color choices affect the readability of presentation materials. High contrast text makes it easier for everyone to read. Participants could be sitting to the side, there could be a bright sun or a glare, or the projection equipment can be old. Presenters should have sufficient contrast between fonts and backgrounds. Thick, dark text on a light background is recommended. Very light text on a dark background is also accessible. Do not use busy or bright backgrounds. Do not use low contrast color combinations. And do not use color to show meaning. Use a standard structure helps both people and assistive devices understand content. Follow a structured outline format like the example on the right. Google and Office both do this automatically. When using images in presentation materials, presenters will choose relevant static images that add to the message. The example image you see here is relevant because it depicts a woman presenting, which is the topic of this webinar. Presenters will make visuals big enough to be seen. And presenters will describe relevant visual details aloud to the audience and leave out irrelevant details. For example, I would describe this image as a woman presenting a graph. That description adds meaning to my presentation. I would not describe it as a blonde woman in a blue dress. That description is irrelevant to my presentation. When choosing images for presentation materials, presenters will be cognizant of color. 1 in 12 men and 1 in 200 women have some level of color blindness. Also, different machines can show colors differently. Choose distinct colors with varying levels of brightness and distinguish with pattern when possible. The image on the left is considered inaccessible. It uses 3 colors of similar brightness with no pattern. The image on the right is considered accessible. It uses 3 colors of varying brightness and further distinguishes lines with pattern. To determine whether color choices are fully accessible, consider if the image is readable in grayscale. Presenters will add alternative text to all images. To do this in PowerPoint, right-click on the image and select Edit Alt Text. In Google Slides, right-click on the image and choose Alt Text. When writing alternate text, be specific about why that image is shown. The description should be relevant to the topic. Presenters will show captions to all video content and confirm ahead of time that captions are readable. Many web video services provide captioning options on video content, and there are tutorials in the resources section of this presentation. For audio content, provide participants with a transcript of the recording. Before showing a video or playing audio content, provide an introduction to the audience that provides context and describes what they are about to hear or view. Finally, we are going to talk about speaking guidelines for presenters. Speak slowly and clearly. Use simple language, avoiding acronyms and jargon. Pause between topics. Ask for questions and give audience members time to process information. Face the audience, allowing them to see your face as you speak. Avoid turning away from the audience. If a microphone is provided, all presenters are required to use it. Describe pertinent parts of graphics, videos, and other visuals to help audience members understand the presentation. For example, on the right, you see the Oklahoma Library Association logo. The important things to note here are that it is gold in color and features an open book in the center. All speakers are also required to work with interpreters and translators as needed. During a panel or question and answer session, presenters and moderators should be extra aware of accessibility requirements. Microphones should be used at all times by both those asking questions and those answering them. Consider responding to questions throughout the presentation rather than at the end. While it may be tempting to ask for questions at the end of the presentation, taking questions throughout supports comprehension and encourages engagement. Allow for written or typed audience questions. OLA conference presenters can do this through the conference app. There are also many free web-based tools that accomplish the same thing. Offer participants a way to follow up with questions. This could be an email address, Twitter handle, hashtag, LinkedIn connection, or an online tool for connecting with the presenter and/or participants. If you have further questions, please reach out by tagging OLA on Twitter at OKLibs using the hashtag OLAPAG, OLA Presentation Accessibility Guidelines. If you are presenting at an OLA conference, you can reach out to the Conference Planning Committee Chair at program@oklibs.org. If you are presenting at another OLA workshop or event, please refer further questions to your event organizer. Finally, here are a list of resources for learning more about presentation accessibility, including the OLA Presentation Accessibility Guidelines and the OLA Standard Presentation Template, which is an accessible, branded presentation template that will be available with this recording. Thank you for joining us for this webinar today and for helping OLA create an inclusive environment for all of our members.